What if I told you that in a single dusty afternoon, one quiet man walked into a saloon, said almost nothing, and by sundown, the entire town of Redrock Flats had been turned inside out? Not by guns, not by shouting, but by the weight of a secret nobody saw coming. Stay right here, because by the end of this story, you'll understand exactly why some people are laughed at, and why sometimes the last laugh costs everything. It was a Tuesday. Nobody important ever arrives on a Tuesday. That's exactly what made it strange. The stranger rode in from the east just before noon, the sun already hammering down on the cracked mud of Main Street, like it had a grudge. His horse was a pale roan, ribs showing just enough to tell a story of long miles. The man himself was coated in a fine layer of trail dust, the kind that fills the creases of your face and makes your age impossible to read. Could have been 30, could have been 55. His jacket was patched at both elbows, his boots worn down at the heels, and his hat. The hat was something else entirely. Wide-brimmed, dark brown, with a single hawk feather tucked into the band. Not a decoration, a marker, something earned. He tied his horse at the post outside the Silverhorn Saloon without a word to the 3 men loitering there, spitting tobacco and watching him the way men watch something they've already decided to dismiss. Then he walked inside. The Silverhorn was the kind of place where the floorboards remembered every fight that had ever happened on them. You could feel it in the way the wood gave slightly under your boots. A soft, knowing creak. The bar ran the full length of the north wall, bottles lined up like soldiers behind Emmett, the barkeep, who had the practiced stillness of a man who'd seen everything and been surprised by very little. 4 men played cards in the corner. A woman named Cecilia sat alone near the window, nursing a drink she hadn't touched in an hour. And at the far end of the bar, taking up space like he owned the deed to it, was Dale Crumb. Dale Crumb. If Redrock Flats had a center of gravity, it was him. Not the mayor. The mayor was a nervous little man named Holloway, who smiled too much and signed whatever Dale put in front of him. Dale was the gravity itself. He owned the feed mill, 3 of the 8 commercial properties on Main Street, and had a handshake agreement with the railroad surveyor that everyone knew about and nobody talked about. He was not a large man physically, maybe 5'9", built like a barrel left out in weather, but he had the voice of someone who expected to be heard and the eyes of someone who kept score. When the dusty stranger walked in and took a stool at the middle of the bar, Dale noticed. Everybody noticed. Redrock Flats was not a large town. Strangers stood out. The stranger ordered water. Just water. Emmett set it down without comment, but 2 of the card players exchanged a glance. In a saloon, ordering water is either a statement of poverty or a statement of something else entirely. The stranger drank it slowly, set the glass down, and said nothing for a long moment. Then Dale Crumb laughed. It started as a low sound, not quite a chuckle, more like air escaping something pressurized. He looked at his card-playing companions, tilted his head toward the stranger, and said, loud enough for the whole room to hear, "I've seen scarecrows better dressed." A couple of laughs. Cecilia near the window didn't laugh. Emmett didn't either. The stranger turned his head and looked at Dale, not with anger, not with shame. He looked at him the way you look at a sign on the road, taking in the information, noting where it points. Then he turned back to his glass of water. That, it turned out, was the wrong response to give Dale Crumb. "Hey, I'm talking to you, friend." The word friend had no friendship in it. The stranger set his glass down again, just slightly more deliberate this time. "I know," he said. His voice was lower than expected, unhurried. "I just didn't figure it required an answer." Dead silence. Even the cards stopped. Now here's where you might think this becomes a story about a fight, about someone pulling iron, about blood on the floorboards. But stick with it, because what actually happened next is what made this day worth remembering for the next 40 years in Redrock Flats. What do you think happened next? Drop your guess in the comments. Let's see who figures it out. The door to the Silver Horn opened. Sheriff Hank Beaumont stepped inside. Hank was a tall man, 6'3", lean, with a gray mustache that had been trimmed the same way since approximately 1872. He wore his badge like it was part of his skeleton, not pinned on top of it. He scanned the room in one pass, the practiced sweep of a man who walked into rooms expecting that something might need his attention, and then he stopped. He stopped because he saw the stranger at the bar. And then Sheriff Hank Beaumont did something that no one in that room had ever seen him do before. He took off his hat, not to hang it up, not because of the heat. He took it off, held it against his chest, and said, quietly, but in the way that quiet things fill a room, "Colonel." The word landed like a stone dropped into still water, rings spreading outward before anyone could speak. The stranger, the dusty, water-drinking, elbow-patched stranger, turned on his stool to face the sheriff. And for the first time, you could see his face clearly. There was a scar along his left jaw, thin and white, the kind that takes years to fade to that color. His eyes were a particular shade of gray that light seemed to pass through rather than bounce off of. He gave a small nod. "Hank," he said, "you got old." "So did you, sir." The sheriff almost smiled. Almost. Dale Crumb, for the first time in recent memory, had nothing to say. Emmett, the barkeeper, later told the story this way. It wasn't that the man was somebody important. It was that Hank Beaumont, who I have personally watched, stare down three armed men without so much as adjusting his posture, looked at that stranger the way my son looks at his grandfather, like the world had more weight in it suddenly. And here is where the story splits open, because understanding why that moment meant what it meant requires going back. Not years, decades. Make sure you're subscribed, because this next part is the piece most history books buried in a footnote, and we're about to pull it all the way into the light. His name, the stranger's name, was Marcus Eli Cord. Born in Tennessee, 1841, third of 6 children on a farm that grew more debt than anything else. By 17, he was working cattle drives across 2 states. By 22, he was doing something else entirely. The war had come, and Marcus Cord had walked into it, not with enthusiasm, not with ideology, but with the quiet, specific competence of a man who understood difficult terrain and the behavior of other men under pressure. He was not a politician in a uniform. He was not a hero made for newspapers. He was the kind of person that commanders quietly pointed at problems and hoped the problem would go away. He rose to the rank of colonel, not because he wanted rank, but because rank followed the kind of results he produced. He led 2 behind-the-lines operations that weren't officially documented until 30 years later. He kept 27 men alive in a situation where the calculus strongly favored none of them surviving, not through a grand act of courage, but through 14 consecutive days of patience, calculation, and the willingness to eat nothing and sleep 4 hours a night until a path presented itself. Hank Beaumont had been one of those 27 men. He had been 19 years old. He had been 3 days from giving up, not on survival, but on the idea that survival was worth the effort. And Marcus Cord had sat next to him on the 3rd night, said nothing for a long time, and then said, "You want to know what gets people through this?" And Hank had said yes. And Marcus had said, "Deciding that the day after this one matters, just the next one. You don't have to believe in anything bigger than that." Hank Beaumont had believed in very little before that night. After it, he believed in enough. He became a lawman because of what he'd seen Marcus Cord do. Not the combat, not the strategy. The part where one man's steadiness became a permission slip for other people to hold on. He wanted to be that. He spent 30 years trying to be that, in a town that was mostly grateful and occasionally ungrateful. And he had never, in all those years, seen Marcus Cord again. Until Tuesday. Now you tell me something. Have you ever had a moment where someone showed up who reminded you of exactly who you were trying to be? Leave that in the comments. Seriously, I want to read those. Back in the Silver Horn, after the room reassembled itself around that single word, Colonel, things began to shift. Dale Crumb, to his credit, was not a stupid man. He was a self-interested man, which is different. He understood, in the 30 seconds after Hank's gesture, that he had laughed at something he hadn't understood. And in Redrock Flats, where reputation was currency, that was a liability he needed to address. He slid off his stool, crossed to where Marcus sat, extended his hand. "I spoke out of turn," he said. "Dale Crumb. I run most of the commercial operations in this town." Marcus looked at the hand, shook it. "Marcus Cord." He paused. "I know who you are, Mr. Crumb." A beat. "You do?" "I've been in this territory for 3 weeks," Marcus said. "Redrock Flats has a reputation." It was unclear from his tone whether that reputation was a good thing or a warning. Dale chose to interpret it as the former. People like Dale usually do. What Dale did not know, what almost no one in Redrock Flats knew, was why Marcus Cord was there. He was not passing through. He was not visiting. He had come specifically, deliberately, to this town because of a letter. The letter had arrived at his winter quarters in New Mexico 6 weeks earlier. It was written in a hand he recognized immediately. Cramped, leftward slanting letters. The penmanship of a man who'd learned to write under difficult conditions and never entirely smoothed it out. It was from a woman named Iris Vane. And what Iris Vane had written in that letter was the kind of thing that makes a man, at 53 years old, pack a single saddlebag, saddle his best remaining horse, and ride for 2 weeks without particular hurry, but without stopping either. Iris Vane had written, "Something is happening to this town. The kind of thing that happens slowly, until it happens all at once. There is a man here who I believe means to own all of it. The land, the water rights, the people's choices. And there is no one here with the particular kind of stubbornness required to stop it. I am writing to you because you are the only person I have ever known who has that kind of stubbornness and the sense to use it quietly." Marcus had read the letter twice. Then he'd read it a third time because of the last sentence, which said, "I also wrote to you because I think you've been alone long enough, and Redrock Flats, despite everything, is a decent place to be less alone." He had folded the letter and put it in his breast pocket, where it had remained for the entire ride. Iris Vane was not in the Silver Horn that afternoon, but she was in Redrock Flats, and Marcus knew exactly where to find her. And before he did anything else, before he began the slow, quiet work of whatever came next, he finished his glass of water, stood up, left 3 coins on the bar for Emmett, nodded once at Hank Beaumont, and walked out into the afternoon sunlight. The 3 men who had been loitering outside were gone. His horse was still there. He untied it, led it down the street to the livery, and made an arrangement with the boy who worked there, a 14-year-old named Will, who had honest eyes and a gap between his front teeth. For 2 weeks of boarding and care. He paid in advance. He always paid in advance. It was a habit from a long time ago, from a man who had taught him that a debt unpaid is a weight on your movement, and he had always preferred to travel light. Then he walked to the east end of town, to a building that was slightly better maintained than its neighbors. Fresh paint on the shutters, window boxes with actual flowers in them, a hand-lettered sign above the door that read, "Vane Dry Goods and Sundry." He stood at the door for a moment, not hesitating, just arriving, the way you do when you've been moving towards something for long enough that the moment of getting there deserves a pause. He knocked. The door opened before the second knock. Iris Vane was 50 years old, with silver in her dark hair and the particular quality of stillness that belongs to people who have been through enough to know that most things resolve themselves, and the ones that don't require patience, not panic. She looked at Marcus Cord standing in her doorway, covered in 2 weeks of trail dust, with a hawk feather in his hatband, and she said, "You're thinner." "You're not," he said. She stepped back to let him in. "Sit down. I'll make coffee." And there, in the back room of Vane Dry Goods, over 2 cups of coffee that had been brewing since before he arrived, because Iris Vane had been watching the road for 3 days, Marcus Cord learned the shape of what Dale Crumb had been building, one quiet transaction at a time. The water rights to the Calico Creek had been transferred 14 months ago to a holding company whose name led back, through 2 layers of paper, to Dale Crumb. The farmers on the eastern edge of the valley had been paying for water access since spring. 3 of the smaller merchants on Main Street had accepted terms on their properties that locked them into escalating rent agreements, with clauses that made it almost impossible to leave without forfeiting their improvements. The railroad surveyor had been entertained at Dale's home 3 times in the past year, and Holloway, the mayor, had not convened a public town meeting since the previous November. It was not dramatic. It was not villainous in the way that makes for easy stories. It was the slow, methodical accumulation of leverage, the kind of thing that doesn't look like anything from the outside until the moment it looks like everything. "He's not a bad man," Iris said. She said it the way you say a complicated truth that needs to be said out loud to be real. "He just believes genuinely that the town works better if he runs it. And he's not entirely wrong. He's competent, but competent and trustworthy are not the same thing, and this town has not entirely figured that out yet." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "The water rights," he said finally. "That's the piece." "That's the piece," she agreed. Because in the West, in the dry, beautiful, unforgiving West, water was not a resource. Water was the fact on which all other facts depended. Control the water, and everything else followed. Farms, livelihoods, decisions, votes, all of it flowed downstream from whoever held that paper. What Marcus understood, what made him useful in situations like this one, was not physical force. It was something quieter and more durable. He understood documents. He understood the chain of title and the way land law worked, and, crucially, he understood that 14 months was not long enough in the territory statutes he knew for a transfer of water rights to be uncontestable. If the original agreement had been signed under duress, or if it could be demonstrated that the transfer had not been properly witnessed, there was a path. It was not a fast path. It was not a certain path. But it was a path. He spent the next 11 days in Redrock Flats. He did not make speeches. He did not confront Dale Crumb publicly. He drank coffee in the morning at Iris's shop and spent his afternoons at the county records office, a 12-mile ride to the seat at Harlan, going through documents with the focused attention of a man who had learned long ago that the most important battles are won before anyone fires. He spoke to the farmers one at a time in their fields, quietly, explaining what he'd found and what it might mean and what the next steps might look like. He was careful not to promise outcomes he couldn't guarantee. He never promised outcomes he couldn't guarantee. He also, on the 4th day, had a single conversation with Dale Crumb, just the 2 of them, in the back of the feed mill, while dust motes spun in the afternoon light. We won't ever know exactly what was said in that room. What we know is what came after. The water rights agreement was renegotiated within 3 weeks. The farmers' access was restored at the original terms, with a provision written into the new document that no single private party could hold exclusive rights to Calico Creek without a public vote of the town council. 2 of the 3 merchants who had signed the problematic rent agreements were released from their escalating clauses. The railroad surveyor's next visit to Redrock Flats was not to Dale Crumb's parlor, but to a town meeting, open to all, where the proposed route was discussed for the first time publicly. Holloway, the mayor, convened that meeting. He looked nervous throughout. He also looked, for the first time in recent memory, like a mayor. And on the morning of the 12th day, Marcus Cord saddled his pale roan and prepared to leave. Hank Beaumont was waiting at the edge of town, as if he'd known. Maybe he had. "You could stay," the sheriff said. "Maybe," Marcus said. And he looked back at the town, the crooked line of Main Street, the shimmer of heat above the rooftops, the green suggestion of the valley beyond the last building. "But I think this place is going to be all right without me watching it." Hank nodded. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, a folded piece of paper, handed it up. "Iris asked me to give you that when you were on your way out. Said you'd understand." Marcus unfolded it, read it, folded it again and put it in his breast pocket, next to the first letter. Hank watched him. "Good news or bad?" "Good," Marcus said. He settled his hat, the wide-brimmed, dark brown hat with the hawk feather that had never been a decoration. "See you, Hank." "See you, Colonel." And he rode east into the morning glare, unhurried, the way he'd ridden in, the town behind him already busy with its Tuesday, or whatever day it was now. The days had run together in the best possible way. And ahead of him, something that was not quite a plan, and not quite a hope, but something in between. The note Iris had written, the second note, contained one sentence. It said, "The flowers in the window box are the same kind my mother grew. I planted them because I thought someday someone worth planting flowers for might notice them." He noticed them. The moment he'd walked up to her door, 11 days ago, he had noticed them. He just hadn't said so. Maybe he would next time. There is a kind of power that doesn't announce itself, that doesn't need the room to go quiet or the crowd to step back. It moves through the world the way water moves through rock, not by force, but by persistence, by finding the places where things are already almost ready to give. Marcus Cord was that kind of power, and Redrock Flats was the kind of town that had almost forgotten such a thing existed, until a dusty stranger walked through the door on a Tuesday and ordered water. Some things you can only learn by watching what a quiet man does when everyone has already decided to look away. Tell me, what did you take from Marcus's story? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. This video was created by artificial intelligence, developed independently and exclusively with the purpose of entertaining and adding value. The characters, places, events, and situations you've seen are fictional and are part of the creative work of the authors. This is a storytelling experience. For historical records, please refer to official and verified sources.